Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
Marty Kane stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, his thick-rimmed glasses perched precariously on his nose. The fluorescent light flickered above him, casting harsh shadows across his face. At 18, he was on the cusp of adulthood, but he still felt like the same awkward, gangly teenager he'd always been. The sound of raised voices filtered through the thin walls of their suburban home. His parents were arguing again, their words muffled but their anger palpable. Marty sighed, running a hand through his shaggy brown hair. The fights had been getting worse lately, and he knew it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. As if on cue, there was a sharp knock on the bathroom door. "Marty?" his mother called, her voice strained. "Can you come out here, please? Your father and I need to talk to you." Marty's stomach twisted with dread. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever was coming. "Yeah, Mom, I'll be right out." In the living room, his parents sat on opposite ends of the couch, their body language tense and guarded. His father, Robert, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a perpetual frown etched into his features. His mother, Sarah, was petite and delicate, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Sit down, son," Robert said, gesturing to the armchair across from them. Marty perched on the edge of the seat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "What's going on?" Sarah took a shaky breath. "Marty, your father and we've decided to get a divorce." The words hit Marty like a physical blow, even though he'd seen it coming for months. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the information. "Oh," he said softly, unsure of how else to respond. Robert cleared his throat. "We wanted to talk to you about what this means for you. You're 18 now, so legally, you can choose where you want to live." Marty's mind raced. He'd always been closer to his mother, finding it easier to connect with her gentle nature than his father's gruff exterior. But the thought of leaving behind everything he'd ever known was terrifying. I don't know," he stammered. "Can I think about it?" Sarah nodded, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need." The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, heated discussions, and tearful goodbyes. In the end, Marty made the decision to move with his mother to Lakeview, a small town about an hour away. She'd found a full-time job there, and the fresh start appealed to both of them. As they packed up their belongings, Marty found himself staring at his reflection once again. This time, he was struck by a sudden urge for change. If he was going to start over, why not reinvent himself completely? With trembling hands, he picked up a pair of scissors and began to cut his hair. Chunks of brown fell to the floor, revealing a softer, more delicate face beneath. When he was finished, he ran his fingers through the choppy layers, marveling at how different he looked. But it wasn't enough. Marty dug through his mother's makeup bag, pulling out an assortment of products he'd never touched before. With clumsy fingers, he applied a light layer of foundation, a touch of blush, and a swipe of mascara. The transformation was subtle but noticeable. "Marty?" his mother called from downstairs. "Are you almost ready to go?" Panic seized him. He couldn't let her see him like this. Not yet. "Just a minute," he called back, hastily wiping the makeup off and shoving his hair under a beanie. As they drove to Lakeview, Marty's mind whirled with possibilities. For the first time in his life, he felt a glimmer of excitement about the future. He wasn't just Marty the nerd anymore. He could be anyone he wanted to be. Their new home in Lakeview was a small two-bedroom house on a quiet street lined with oak trees. It was a far cry from their spacious suburban home, but Marty found himself warming to its cozy charm. "What do you think?" Sarah asked as they unloaded boxes from the car. Marty smiled, surprising himself with how genuine it felt. "I think it's perfect, Mom." That night, after his mother had gone to bed, Marty snuck into the bathroom with a bag of supplies he'd secretly purchased. He carefully applied the hair dye, watching as his mousy brown locks transformed into a rich chestnut color. The next morning, he woke early and made his way to the local eye doctor. It was time to ditch the glasses that had defined his look for so long. Dr. Anderson, a kindly older woman with silver hair, peered at him over her own spectacles. "Contact lenses, you say? Are you sure you're ready for the responsibility?" Marty nodded eagerly. "Yes, I'm sure. It's time for a change." As he slipped the contacts in for the first time, Marty was struck by how different the world looked without the barrier of his glasses. But it wasn't until he glanced in the mirror that he truly understood the magnitude of the change. Without his glasses, Marty's face took on a softer, almost feminine quality. His large hazel eyes were now the focal point, framed by long lashes that he'd never noticed before. His newly styled hair fell in soft waves around his face, accentuating his delicate features. Dr. Anderson smiled at him. "Well, don't you look handsome? The girls at school won't know what hit them." Marty blushed, unsure how to respond. He wasn't thinking about impressing girls. In fact, he wasn't sure what he was thinking at all. As he walked home, he caught his reflection in shop windows, marveling at the person staring back at him. For the first time in his life, Marty felt pretty. The realization both thrilled and terrified him. When he got home, his best friend Gerald was waiting on the porch. Gerald had been Marty's closest confidant since elementary school, the only person who truly understood his quirks and insecurities. "Holy crap, dude!" Gerald exclaimed, his eyes widening as he took in Marty's new look. "What happened to you?" Marty shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Just thought I'd try something new. What do you think?" Gerald circled him, studying him from every angle. "I think, you look like a girl, man. But like, in a good way? I don't know, it's weird." Marty's heart raced. "Is it really that noticeable?" Gerald laughed. "Dude, you look like you could be your own sister. It's freaky." As they spent the afternoon playing video games and catching up, Marty found himself stealing glances in the mirror. Each time, he was struck by how natural his new look felt. It wasn't just a disguise. It felt like he was finally seeing his true self. That night, as he lay in bed, Marty made a decision. He would use this transformation as an opportunity to explore a side of himself he'd always kept hidden. At his new school, he could be anyone he wanted to be, and maybe, just maybe, he could finally be happy. Chapter 2. A New Beginning in Lakeview. The first day of senior year dawned bright and clear, but Marty's stomach was in knots. He stood in front of his closet, agonizing over what to wear. Part of him wanted to embrace his new look fully, to walk into Lakeview High as the person he'd glimpsed in the mirror. But fear held him back. In the end, he compromised. He put his glasses back on, hiding his eyes behind the thick lenses. He chose a baggy sweater and jeans, effectively concealing his slender frame. His long hair was tucked behind his collar, giving the illusion of a shorter cut. "Ready for your first day?" Sarah asked as Marty came downstairs. He nodded, forcing a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to school was short but tense. Marty's palms were sweaty as he gripped the straps of his backpack. As they pulled up to the imposing brick building, he felt a wave of nausea wash over him. "You'll be fine," Sarah reassured him, squeezing his hand. "Just be yourself." Marty wanted to laugh. If only she knew how complicated that simple advice had become. The halls of Lakeview High were a chaotic maze of lockers, classrooms, and unfamiliar faces. Marty kept his head down, clutching his schedule like a lifeline as he navigated the crowds. His first class was Advanced Placement English, taught by a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Hawthorne. As Marty slipped into a seat at the back of the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was staring at him. "All right, class," Mrs. Hawthorne announced, her voice cutting through the chatter. "We have a new student joining us this year, Martin Kane. Would you like to introduce yourself?" Marty's heart pounded as he stood up, his legs shaky beneath him. Hi," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "I'm Marty. I just moved here from—" "Speak up, Mr. Kane," Mrs. Hawthorne interrupted. "We can't hear you in the back." Marty cleared his throat, willing his voice to be stronger. "I'm Marty," he repeated, louder this time. "I moved here from Oak Ridge. I like to read and play video games." As he sat back down, he caught a few students snickering. His face burned with embarrassment. So much for making a good first impression. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of new faces and information overload. By the time lunch rolled around, Marty was exhausted and overwhelmed. He found a quiet corner of the cafeteria and sat alone, picking at his sandwich without much appetite. "Is this seat taken?" Marty looked up to see a girl with bright blue hair and multiple piercings smiling down at him. She gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Oh, no," Marty stammered. "Go ahead." The girl plopped down, extending her hand. I'm Zoe. You're new here, right? Marty nodded, shaking her hand tentatively. Yeah, I'm Marty. Just moved here a few weeks ago. Zoe's eyes sparkled with interest. Cool. Where are you from? What brings you to our little slice of paradise? As they talked, Marty found himself relaxing for the first time all day. Zoe was easy to talk to, her enthusiasm infectious. She didn't seem to care about his awkwardness or his nerdy interests. In fact, she shared many of them. You should join the school's gaming club, Zoe suggested as they finished lunch. We meet every Thursday after school. It's a pretty chill group. Marty hesitated. The idea of joining a club was tempting, but he was still wary of drawing attention to himself. Maybe, he said noncommittally. I'll think about it. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Marty felt a mix of relief and disappointment. He'd survived his first day, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still hiding his true self. Walking home, he made a detour to a small park near his house. He found a secluded bench and sat down, pulling out a small makeup bag he'd hidden in his backpack. With trembling hands, he removed his glasses and applied a light layer of mascara and lip gloss. The face that looked back at him from his phone's camera was a perfect blend of Marty and the person he'd glimpsed in the mirror that day at the eye doctor's office. It felt right in a way he couldn't quite explain. As the weeks passed, Marty fell into a routine. At school, he maintained his nerdy, unremarkable persona. But in the privacy of his room or during solitary walks in the park, he allowed himself to explore his feminine side. He practiced applying makeup, experimented with different hairstyles, and even ordered a few items of women's clothing online. His friendship with Zoe deepened, and he found himself opening up to her bit by bit. She seemed to sense that there was more to him than met the eye, but she never pushed or pried. One afternoon, as they sat in Zoe's backyard working on a history project, Marty found himself on the verge of confessing everything. The words were on the tip of his tongue when Zoe's phone buzzed with a text. "Oh shoot," she said, frowning at the screen. "I totally forgot I promised to help set up for the fall festival this weekend. Want to come with? It could be fun." Marty hesitated. The fall festival was a big deal in Lakeview, drawing people from all over the county. The idea of being surrounded by so many strangers made him nervous, but the hopeful look on Zoe's face made it hard to say no. "Sure," he agreed, surprising himself. "Why not?" The day of the fall festival dawned crisp and clear, the trees in the town square ablaze with autumn colors. Marty arrived early to help Zoe and the other volunteers set up booths and hang decorations. As the festival got into full swing, Marty found himself enjoying the festive atmosphere. The air was filled with the scent of caramel apples and pumpkin spice, and laughter echoed from every corner of the square. "Hey, want to check out the fortune teller?" Zoe asked, grabbing Marty's arm and pointing to a purple tent set up near the edge of the festival grounds. Marty raised an eyebrow. "You believe in that stuff?" Zoe shrugged. "Not really, but it's fun. Come on, live a little." Inside the tent, the air was heavy with incense. An elderly woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes sat behind a small table, her gnarled hands resting on a crystal ball. "Welcome, seekers," she intoned, her voice surprisingly deep. "Who wishes to glimpse their future?" Zoe nudged Marty forward. "He does." Marty shot her a panicked look, but it was too late to back out. He sat down across from the fortune teller, his palms sweaty. The woman's eyes seemed to look right through him as she began to move her hands over the crystal ball. "I see. A transformation," she murmured. "A butterfly emerging from its cocoon. You stand at a crossroads, young one. The path you choose will define not just your future, but your very identity." Marty's heart raced. Could she possibly know? "But beware," the fortune teller continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The journey of self-discovery is not without its perils. You will face challenges both from within and without. Trust in yourself and in those who truly love you." As they left the tent, Zoe babbled excitedly about the fortune teller's words, but Marty was lost in thought. The woman's predictions had hit uncomfortably close to home. That night, as Marty lay in bed, he couldn't shake the fortune teller's words from his mind. A transformation, a crossroads, challenges from within and without. It all felt so relevant to his current struggle. He thought about the person he pretended to be at school and the person he was becoming in private. How long could he keep living this double life? And more importantly, did he want to? The next morning, Marty woke with a sense of determination. He couldn't keep hiding forever. It was time to take a small step towards being his true self. As he got ready for school, he left his glasses off, opting for his contact lenses instead. He styled his hair carefully, allowing it to frame his face in soft waves. He even applied a touch of tinted lip balm, barely noticeable, but enough to make him feel more like himself. Walking into school that day, Marty felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. A few people did double takes as he passed, clearly noticing something different about him. But for the most part, life went on as usual, until lunch. As Marty sat down at his usual table with Zoe, he noticed a group of guys from the football team eyeing him and whispering. His stomach churned with anxiety. "Well, well," a deep voice drawled. "Look who decided to pretty themselves up." Marty looked up to see Brad Thompson, the team's quarterback and resident bully, looming over their table. His cronies flanked him, smirking. "Got something to tell us, Kane?" Brad sneered. "Trying out a new look?" Marty's mouth went dry. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Zoe stood up, her eyes flashing with anger. "Back off, Brad. Don't you have anything better to do than harass people?" Brad's smirk widened. "Ah, how cute. Your girlfriend's standing up for you, Kane. Or should I say, girlfriend?" The cafeteria had gone quiet, all eyes on their table. Marty felt like he might pass out from the tension. Just then, a calm voice cut through the silence. "Is there a problem here?" Mr. Daniels, the school counselor, appeared beside their table, his expression stern as he surveyed the scene. Brad's smirk faltered. "No, sir, just having a friendly chat." Mr. Daniels raised an eyebrow. "I see. Well, perhaps you and your friends would like to continue this friendly chat in my office?" As Brad and his friends skulked away, Mr. Daniels turned to Marty. "Are you all right, Mr. Kane?" Marty nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Mr. Daniels smiled kindly. "My door is always open if you need to talk. To both of you," he added, nodding at Zoe. As the counselor walked away, the cafeteria slowly returned to its normal buzz of conversation. Marty slumped in his seat, feeling drained. Zoe reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "You okay?" Marty managed a weak smile. "Yeah, I think so. Thanks for standing up for me." Zoe's eyes were full of concern. "Marty, you know you can talk to me about anything, right? I mean, if there's something going on..." Marty took a deep breath. Maybe it was time to trust someone with his secret. "Actually, Zoe, there is something I've been wanting to tell you." As Marty began to open up, pouring out the confusion and fear he'd been feeling, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Zoe listened without judgment, her eyes full of understanding and support. "I don't know exactly what this all means," Marty concluded. "I just know that when I look in the mirror and see this other side of myself, it feels right, but I'm scared of what people will think, how they'll react." Zoe squeezed his hand again. "Marty, you're my friend, no matter what, and anyone who can't accept you for who you are isn't worth your time." Tears pricked at Marty's eyes. "Thanks, Zoe. That means a lot." As they left the cafeteria, Marty felt a newfound sense of hope. He wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, he could find the courage to fully embrace his true self. That afternoon, as Marty walked home from school, he found himself taking a different route. His feet carried him to a small boutique on Main Street, its window display full of colorful dresses and accessories. Taking a deep breath, Marty pushed open the door. A bell tinkled softly, announcing his presence. "Can I help you?" a friendly voice asked. An older woman with kind eyes and silver hair smiled at him from behind the counter. Marty's heart raced. This was it, a small step, but a significant one. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm looking for a dress. For myself." The woman's smile never faltered. "Of course, dear. Let's see what we can find that suits you." As Marty browsed through racks of soft fabrics and feminine styles, he felt a sense of rightness wash over him. This was just the beginning of his journey, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. He may have started the school year as Marty Kane, but something told him that by the end of it, he might be ready to introduce the world to someone new. Someone who had always been there, waiting to emerge, someone named Allie. Marty Kane stared at his reflection in the mirror, his blue eyes searching for something he couldn't quite define. The start of senior year loomed just days away, and an unfamiliar restlessness had taken root in his chest. At 18, Marty had always been the quiet, introspective type, more likely to be found with his nose in a book than at a rowdy party. But lately, something felt different, off-kilter, like a painting hung slightly askew. He ran a hand through his shaggy light brown hair, making a mental note to get it trimmed before school started. As he did so, his fingers lingered on the soft strands. For a fleeting moment, he imagined what it might feel like longer, framing his face in gentle waves. The thought startled him, and he quickly pushed it aside. Marty's mother, Sarah, called up the stairs. "Honey, don't forget we're having dinner with the Johnsons tonight. Make sure you wear something nice." He sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. The Johnsons were old family friends, and their daughter Kelsey had been in Marty's class since elementary school. He knew his mom harbored not-so-secret hopes that the two might hit it off romantically, but Marty had never felt that spark with Kelsey, or with any girl for that matter. "Okay, Mom," he called back, rifling through his closet for a presentable button-down shirt. As he did so, his eyes caught on an old Halloween costume shoved in the back, a flowing green dress from the year he'd gone as Peter Pan. He'd forgotten all about it. Without thinking, Marty reached out and ran his fingers over the soft fabric. A shiver ran through him, equal parts excitement and trepidation. Shaking his head to clear it, Marty grabbed a blue Oxford shirt and khakis. He dressed quickly, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that something fundamental was shifting inside him. As he headed downstairs to meet his parents, Marty couldn't shake the sense that this year would be different. He just didn't know how yet. Chapter 2. Seeds of Self-Discovery. The first few weeks of senior year passed in a blur of syllabi, college application prep, and the usual high school social dynamics. Marty went through the motions, but he felt increasingly disconnected from his peers. While his classmates chattered about homecoming and football games, Marty found himself lost in daydreams he couldn't quite explain. One afternoon in early October, Marty was killing time in the school library during a free period. He wandered aimlessly through the stacks, trailing his fingers along the spines of books. Without realizing it, he found himself in the psychology section. A slim volume caught his eye: Gender Identity and Expression in Adolescents and Young Adults. Heart pounding, Marty glanced around furtively before pulling the book from the shelf. He flipped it open, scanning the table of contents with growing fascination. Words and phrases jumped out at him: gender dysphoria, non-binary identities, transitioning. It was like a light bulb going off in his mind. This was it, the missing piece he'd been searching for. Marty spent the rest of his free period devouring the book, scarcely daring to breathe. When the bell rang, he hastily shoved it back on the shelf, but the seed had been planted. That night, after his parents went to bed, Marty stayed up late researching online. He read personal accounts from transgender individuals, pored over medical information, and watched countless coming-out videos on YouTube. As the weeks went by, Marty found himself paying more attention to the girls in his class, not out of attraction, but with a sort of wistful longing. He noticed the way they styled their hair, the clothes they wore, how they carried themselves. Sometimes he caught himself mimicking their mannerisms without even realizing it. One day in English class, they were reading Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. As they discussed Viola's disguise as Cesario, Marty felt a jolt of recognition. The idea of presenting as a different gender, of exploring a hidden part of oneself, it resonated deeply. After class, Marty lingered to talk to his teacher, Miss Ramirez. "I was wondering," he said hesitantly, "do you know of any other books or plays that deal with, gender identity stuff, like Twelfth Night?" Miss Ramirez's eyes lit up. "Absolutely! There's Virginia Woolf's Orlando, for one, and in more contemporary literature, you might enjoy Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg or Nevada by Imogen Binney." She scribbled the titles on a Post-it note and handed it to Marty with a warm smile. "It's a fascinating topic, isn't it? Let me know what you think if you read any of them." Marty clutched the note like a lifeline. "Thanks, Miss Ramirez. I will." As he left the classroom, Marty felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe he wasn't alone in these feelings after all. Maybe there were others out there who understood what he was going through. That night, as Marty lay in bed, he allowed himself to really imagine for the first time, what if he wasn't Marty at all? What if deep down, he was someone else entirely? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. He closed his eyes and pictured a different version of himself. Softer features, longer hair, curves instead of angles. In his mind's eye, this new self smiled back at him, radiating confidence and joy. Marty drifted off to sleep with that image in his head, feeling for the first time like he was on the right path. He may have started the school year as Marty Kane, but something told him that by the end of it, he might be ready to introduce the world to someone new, someone who had always been there, waiting to emerge, someone named Allie. Chapter 3. Mary's Emergence. As autumn faded into winter, Marty's internal journey continued. He devoured every book Miss Ramirez had recommended, finding solace and understanding in their pages. But while his mind was opening to new possibilities, his day-to-day life remained largely unchanged. He was still shy, still introverted, still struggling to connect with his peers. The annual Lakeview Street Fair was approaching, a beloved community tradition that marked the start of the holiday season. In years past, Marty had always begged off attending, preferring the solitude of his room to the noisy crowds. But this year, an idea began to take shape in his mind. What if the street fair could be an opportunity, a chance to step outside himself, or rather, to step into a truer version of himself? The plan came together slowly, in stolen moments and late-night musings. Marty knew he couldn't simply show up to the fair in a dress. The risk of running into someone he knew was too great. But what if he created an entirely new persona, someone no one in Lakeview had ever met before? Heart racing with equal parts terror and excitement, Marty began to prepare. He ordered a wig online, using cash from his part-time job at the local bookstore so it wouldn't show up on his parents' credit card statement. He practiced walking in heels when the house was empty, wincing at his awkward steps but determined to improve. He watched countless makeup tutorials on YouTube, marveling at the transformative power of contouring and highlight. The night before the fair, Marty lay awake long into the small hours, his mind whirling with possibilities and fears. What if someone recognized him? What if he made a fool of himself? But underneath the anxiety, a quiet certainty burned. This felt right in a way nothing else ever had. As dawn broke on the day of the street fair, Marty's alarm jolted him awake. His parents had already left for work, giving him the privacy he needed. With trembling hands, he began his transformation. First came the undergarments, a padded bra carefully stuffed to create the illusion of a modest chest, and a pair of control-top pantyhose to smooth his figure. Over that, he slipped on a simple black skirt and a soft sweater in a deep burgundy that complemented his coloring. The wig came next, a cascade of chestnut waves that fell just past his shoulders. Marty saved the makeup for last, knowing it would be the most challenging part. He worked slowly and methodically, following the steps he'd practiced in secret over the past weeks. Foundation to even out his skin tone, a touch of blush to add warmth to his cheeks, neutral eyeshadow, carefully blended, several attempts at eyeliner before he achieved a passable cat eye, and finally, a swipe of tinted lip gloss. When he was finished, Marty took a deep breath and turned to face the full-length mirror on his closet door. The person staring back at him was both familiar and utterly foreign. Gone was the awkward, gangly boy he'd always known. In his place stood a young woman, slender and graceful, with delicate features and bright, curious eyes. "Hello," Marty whispered, and then cleared his throat. He'd been practicing a softer, higher voice, but it still felt strange on his tongue. "Hello," he tried again. "I'm Mary." Mary. The name had come to him in a dream a few nights ago, and it felt right. Similar enough to Marty that he'd respond to it naturally, but unmistakably feminine. Mary smoothed her skirt and took a tentative step in her low heels, then another. She walked the length of the room, marveling at how different her body felt, how it moved, how it occupied space. For the first time in her life, she felt truly comfortable in her own skin. A car horn honked outside, startling Mary out of her reverie. The street fair would be starting soon. It was time to venture out into the world and see what awaited her. With one last glance in the mirror, Mary grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Her heart was pounding, but a smile played at the corners of her lips. Whatever happened today, she knew her life would never be the same. Chapter 4. A Daring Adventure at the Street Fair. The crisp November air nipped at Mary's cheeks as she made her way down Maple Street towards the town center. She'd opted to park a few blocks away from the fair, both to avoid the worst of the traffic and to give herself a chance to acclimate to being out in public in her new persona. Each step in her low heels felt like a small victory. Mary concentrated on the rhythmic click-clack against the sidewalk, using it to calm her nerves. She'd practiced walking in heels for weeks, but doing so outside where anyone could see was a different matter entirely. As she rounded the corner onto Main Street, the sights and sounds of the Lakeview Street Fair enveloped her. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, and the aroma of kettle corn and cinnamon-roasted nuts filled the air. Families strolled hand in hand, children darted between booths, and laughter mingled with the strains of live music from a small stage set up in the town square. Mary paused for a moment, taking it all in. In previous years, the chaos and crowds had always overwhelmed her, but today, something felt different. She wasn't here as Marty, the shy outsider. She was Mary, and Mary was whoever she wanted to be. With a deep breath, she stepped into the throng. Her first stop was a booth selling handmade jewelry. The elderly woman behind the table smiled warmly at her. "Those earrings would look lovely with your coloring, dear," she said, gesturing to a pair of delicate silver leaves. Mary's hand flew to her ear, realizing with a start that she'd forgotten to put on any jewelry. "Oh, I don't have pierced ears," she stammered, her cheeks flushing. The woman's smile never faltered. "Not to worry, I have some lovely clip-ons as well. Why don't you try these?" She held out a pair of simple pearl studs. Grateful for the woman's kindness, Mary accepted the earrings and carefully clipped them on. When she looked in the small mirror on the booth's counter, her breath caught in her throat. The pearls framed her face perfectly, adding a touch of elegance to her outfit. "They're perfect," Mary said softly. "I'll take them." As she continued through the fair, Mary felt her confidence growing. She sampled apple cider and chatted with the owner of a local bakery about their pumpkin spice muffins. She admired handcrafted pottery and bought a small ceramic mug painted with delicate wildflowers. At one point, she spotted Kelsey Johnson and a group of girls from school near the face painting booth. Mary's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. They had no reason to connect this stranger with their classmate Marty. Still, she gave them a wide berth, just to be safe. As the afternoon wore on, Mary found herself drawn to the sound of music coming from the small stage in the town square. A local band was playing covers of pop songs, and a crowd had gathered to listen and dance. Mary hung back at first, content to tap her foot and sway to the rhythm. But then the opening chords of Dancing Queen by ABBA filled the air, and something inside Mary sparked to life. This had always been one of her favorite songs, one she danced to alone in her room when no one was watching. Before she could second-guess herself, Mary was moving towards the makeshift dance floor. She closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, her body moving in ways it never had before. The swish of her skirt around her legs, the sway of her hips, the way her hair bounced with each step, it all felt gloriously, beautifully right. When the song ended, Mary opened her eyes to find several people smiling at her. An older couple nearby clapped appreciatively. "You've got some moves, young lady," the man called out. Mary felt her face grow warm, but for once it wasn't from embarrassment. It was the flush of joy, of feeling truly seen and appreciated for who she was. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the fair, Mary knew it was time to head home. She had to be back before her parents returned from work. But as she walked back to her car, her steps were light, almost bouncing. For a few precious hours she had been free to be herself, her true self, without fear or shame. And nothing had gone wrong. No one had pointed and laughed. No one had questioned her right to exist in this space. She had simply been another face in the crowd, another young woman enjoying a beautiful fall day. Mary slipped into the driver's seat and caught sight of herself in the rearview mirror. Her makeup was slightly smudged, and a few strands of hair had escaped from her careful styling, but her eyes were bright, alive in a way they'd never been before. "Hello, Mary," she whispered to her reflection. "It's nice to finally meet you." As she drove home, Mary's mind was already racing with possibilities. The street fair had been a success beyond her wildest dreams. It had proven to her that she could exist in the world as Mary, that this wasn't just some fantasy or phase, but it had also left her wanting more. A few hours of freedom weren't enough. She wanted to live as Mary all the time, to let the world see her true self every day. The road ahead would be challenging, she knew. There would be difficult conversations with her parents, potential backlash from peers, and the daunting process of medical and social transition. But for the first time, Mary felt ready to face those challenges head-on. As she pulled into her driveway, Mary made a silent promise to herself. This wouldn't be the last time she stepped out as her true self. It was just the beginning of a much bigger journey. With renewed determination, she headed inside to wash away the physical traces of Mary, but nothing could erase the memory of how it had felt to finally be herself. That feeling, she knew, would stay with her forever. Epilogue: The Road Ahead. In the weeks that followed the street fair, Marty found himself thinking constantly about his experience as Mary. He began to open up to a few trusted friends, starting with his English teacher, Miss Ramirez. Her unwavering support gave him the courage to confide in his best friend Alex, who responded with a tight hug and a promise to always have Marty's back, no matter what name or pronouns he chose to use. As winter turned to spring, Marty, now going by Mary full-time among her small circle of confidants, began to plan for the future. She researched LGBTQ-friendly colleges and support groups in nearby cities. She started saving money from her part-time job, knowing that transitioning would come with financial costs. The conversation with her parents loomed large in Mary's mind. She knew it would be difficult, but she also knew she couldn't keep living a double life. One evening in late April, with trembling hands and a racing heart, Mary sat her parents down and told them everything. There were tears and confusion, anger and fear, but underneath it all, there was love. It wasn't an easy road, but slowly, day by day, Mary's parents began to understand. They started attending PF lag meetings, reading books about transgender experiences, and learning how to support their daughter. As graduation approached, Mary made the decision to walk across the stage as herself. It meant coming out to the entire school, facing potential ridicule and rejection, but it also meant being true to who she was, refusing to hide any longer. The day of graduation dawned bright and clear. Mary stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her cap and gown. Her hair, now grown out to her shoulders, framed her face in soft waves. A touch of mascara accentuated her blue eyes, and a swipe of tinted lip balm completed her simple makeup. "Mary Kane!" the principal called out. And as Mary walked across the stage to accept her diploma, she heard something unexpected: applause. Not just from her family and close friends, but from many of her classmates as well. Tears pricked at her eyes as she realized that for every person who might judge or reject her, there were others who would support and accept her. As she moved her tassel from right to left, symbolizing her transition from student to graduate, Mary felt like she was marking an even more significant transition, from a life of hiding and fear to one of authenticity and hope. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges and setbacks, moments of doubt and pain. But as Mary looked out at the sea of faces, her parents beaming with pride, Alex giving her a thumbs up, Miss Ramirez nodding encouragingly, she knew she wasn't facing those challenges alone. Mary Kane was ready to step into the world as her true self, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. And for the first time in her life, she couldn't wait to see what came next. Mary Kane took a deep breath as she stepped out of Miss Ramirez's office, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through her veins. The warm, encouraging smile from her guidance counselor had given her the final push she needed to embrace her true self. As she walked down the bustling high school hallway, Mary felt like she was seeing the world through new eyes. The chatter of students and the slamming of lockers faded into the background as Mary's mind raced with possibilities. She had spent so long hiding behind the facade of Marty, afraid to show the world who she really was. But now, with Miss Ramirez's support and her own growing confidence, Mary was ready to step into the light. As she reached her locker, Mary caught her reflection in the small mirror she had taped inside. She saw the hints of the person she wanted to be, the softness in her features, the spark in her eyes that had been dulled for so long. A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Today was the day everything would change. The annual Spring Festival was just around the corner, and Mary had made up her mind. She would attend as herself, as Mary, for the first time. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, but she knew it was a crucial step in her journey. That afternoon, Mary headed to her best friend Sarah's house. Sarah had been the first person Mary had confided in about her true identity, and she had been nothing but supportive. As Mary knocked on the door, she felt a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. Sarah opened the door with a wide grin. "Hey you, come on in. I've got everything ready for our makeover session." Mary stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the comforting scent of vanilla candles and the sound of upbeat music playing softly in the background. Sarah's room was a whirlwind of clothes, makeup, and accessories, a treasure trove for Mary's transformation. "Okay, so I've picked out a few outfits I think would look amazing on you," Sarah said, gesturing to a pile of clothes on her bed. "And I've got all my makeup laid out. We're going to make you look absolutely stunning for the festival." Mary felt a lump form in her throat, overwhelmed by her friend's enthusiasm and support. "Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you." Sarah pulled her into a tight hug. "That's what best friends are for. Now let's get started." The next few hours were a flurry of activity as Sarah helped Mary transform. They tried on different outfits, experimenting with styles that Mary had only dreamed of wearing before. Sarah patiently taught Mary how to apply makeup, showing her tricks for contouring and highlighting that brought out her natural beauty. As the sun began to set, Mary stood in front of Sarah's full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the person staring back at her. She wore a flowing sundress in a soft blue that complemented her eyes, cinched at the waist with a delicate belt. Her hair, usually hidden under baseball caps, was styled in loose waves that framed her face. The makeup Sarah had applied was subtle but effective, enhancing her features without overwhelming them. "Well?" Sarah asked, standing beside her with an expectant smile. "What do you think?" Mary's eyes filled with tears as she turned to her friend. I think this is who I've always been meant to be. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much." Sarah squeezed her hand. "You look beautiful, Mary. And more importantly, you look happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you." The next morning, Mary woke up early, butterflies dancing in her stomach. Today was the day of the spring festival, and she was going to step out into the world as her true self for the first time. She carefully put on the outfit she and Sarah had chosen, taking extra care with her makeup and hair. As she made her way to the festival grounds, Mary could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The fairgrounds were already bustling with activity. Colorful booths lined the paths, the air filled with the scent of popcorn and cotton candy. Laughter and excited chatter surrounded her as families and groups of friends enjoyed the festivities. Mary took a deep breath and stepped into the crowd. To her amazement, no one gave her a second glance. She blended seamlessly into the throng of festival goers, just another girl enjoying the beautiful spring day. A sense of exhilaration washed over her as she realized she was passing. She was being seen as the person she truly was. As she wandered through the festival, Mary found herself drawn to a booth selling handmade jewelry. She was admiring a delicate silver bracelet when a voice beside her said, "That would look really pretty on you." Mary turned to see a friendly-looking girl with curly red hair and a smattering of freckles across her nose. The girl smiled and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Amy Milletti. I don't think I've seen you around before. Are you new in town?" For a moment, Mary panicked. She hadn't prepared for conversations like this. But then she remembered Miss Ramirez's words of encouragement and took a deep breath. "Hi, Amy. I'm Mary. I'm not new exactly. I've just been keeping to myself a lot, but I'm trying to be more outgoing now." Amy's smile widened. "Well, it's great to meet you, Mary. Hey, are you planning on going to the dance tonight? A bunch of us are going together if you'd like to join." Mary felt a mix of excitement and anxiety at the invitation. She hadn't planned on going to the dance, but the thought of fully immersing herself in this new identity was tempting. "That sounds fun," she said cautiously. "I'll think about it." As they chatted, Amy's eyes suddenly widened. "Oh, Mary, you've got a little run in your pantyhose. Here, let me help you." Before Mary could react, Amy knelt down and carefully fixed the small imperfection in Mary's stockings. Mary felt a rush of gratitude for Amy's kindness. It was such a simple, friendly gesture, something she had never experienced as Marty. "Thank you," she said softly. "That's really nice of you." Amy stood up and linked her arm through Mary's. "It's no problem at all. That's what friends are for, right? Now come on, let me show you around the festival. There's this amazing fries stand you have to try." As they walked arm in arm through the fairgrounds, Mary felt a warmth spreading through her chest. This was what she had always longed for, to be accepted, to make connections, to be seen as herself. The fact that it was happening so naturally, so effortlessly, filled her with joy. Amy led her to a bustling food stand where the smell of freshly fried potatoes filled the air. As they waited in line, Mary's eyes were drawn to the young man working the fryer. He had tousled brown hair and a kind smile that made her heart skip a beat. When it was their turn to order, the young man looked up and locked eyes with Mary. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. "Hi there," he said, his voice warm and friendly. "What can I get for you ladies?" Amy piped up, ordering for both of them, but Mary barely heard her. She was too focused on the way the young man's eyes kept finding hers, the soft smile playing at the corners of his mouth. As he handed them their fries, he introduced himself. "I'm Barry, by the way. I hope you enjoy the fries. Maybe I'll see you around later?" Mary managed to stammer out a quiet, "Thank you," before Amy whisked her away, giggling and nudging her playfully. "Looks like someone's caught Barry's eye," Amy teased. "He's never that friendly with customers. You should definitely come to the dance tonight." As the day wore on, Mary found herself swept up in the joy and excitement of the festival. She played games, rode rides, and laughed more than she had in years. The constant fear of being discovered, of not passing, began to fade away. For the first time, Mary felt truly comfortable in her own skin. But as the sun began to set and the dance drew nearer, a familiar anxiety began to creep back in. Mary knew she couldn't attend the dance in her current outfit. It would raise too many questions when she returned home. She needed to find a way to change back into her everyday clothes without arousing suspicion. Excusing herself from Amy and the group of friends she had made throughout the day, Mary made her way to a nearby store. She purchased a fresh pair of pantyhose and a simple outfit that could pass for either gender, a plain t-shirt and jeans. In the store's bathroom, she carefully removed her makeup and styled her hair into a more neutral look. Finally, she put on her glasses, the final touch to transform back into the person everyone knew as Marty. As she looked at herself in the mirror, Mary felt a pang of sadness. She had loved being herself, being Mary all day, but she reminded herself that this was just the beginning. One day, she would be able to be Mary all the time. For now, this compromise would have to do. Returning to the festival grounds, Mary made her way to the dance area. The sun had set, and colorful lights illuminated the makeshift dance floor. The air was filled with the sound of upbeat music and laughter. For a moment, Mary hesitated at the edge of the crowd, her old insecurities threatening to overwhelm her. But then she saw Barry, the young man from the fries stand, standing near the punch bowl. He was scanning the crowd, and when his eyes landed on Mary, a look of recognition crossed his face. To her surprise, he smiled and waved her over. Taking a deep breath, Mary walked towards him, her heart pounding in her chest. As she approached, Barry's smile widened. "Hey there," he said warmly. "I was hoping I'd see you again. I'm Barry." Mary started, then paused. This was her chance to be herself, even if she wasn't dressed as Mary. "I'm Mary," she finished, her voice stronger. Barry's eyes lit up. "Mary, it's nice to meet you properly. I was wondering if you'd like to dance?" Mary felt a rush of excitement and nervousness. "I'd love to," she said softly. As Barry led her onto the dance floor, Mary caught sight of Amy in the crowd. For a moment, she feared Amy wouldn't recognize her in her current attire. But to her amazement, Amy's face broke into a wide grin, and she gave Mary a thumbs up. The music shifted to a slower song, and Barry gently placed his hands on Mary's waist. As they swayed to the music, Mary felt a sense of peace wash over her. Here she was, dancing with a cute boy who saw her for who she truly was, surrounded by people who accepted her. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. "You know," Barry said softly, "I've been watching you all day. There's something special about you, Mary, something that draws people in. I'm really glad I got the chance to meet you." Mary felt her cheeks flush with warmth. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm glad I met you too." As the night wore on, Mary danced and laughed with Barry, Amy, and her new friends. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, questions from her parents, decisions about how and when to come out to more people. But for now, in this moment, everything was perfect. As the final song of the night played, Barry pulled Mary close. "I'd really like to see you again," he said softly. "Maybe we could go for coffee sometime?" Mary's heart soared. "I'd love that," she replied, a genuine smile spreading across her face. As the dance came to an end and people began to disperse, Mary said her goodbyes to her new friends. Amy pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so glad I met you, Mary," she said warmly. "You're an amazing person, you know that? Don't ever let anyone tell you differently." Mary felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Thank you, Amy, for everything. As she walked home under the starry sky, Mary felt a sense of peace she had never experienced before. The day had been a whirlwind of emotions and experiences, each one affirming her decision to embrace her true self. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time she felt equipped to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Arriving home, Mary quietly made her way to her room. As she got ready for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Even without the makeup and feminine clothes, she could see Mary shining through. She was there in the confident set of her shoulders, the spark of joy in her eyes, the small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Mary crawled into bed, her mind replaying the events of the day. She thought of Miss Ramirez's encouraging words, Sarah's unwavering support, Amy's instant friendship, and Barry's gentle kindness. Each of these people had played a part in helping her take this monumental step towards living as her authentic self. As she drifted off to sleep, Mary felt a sense of excitement for what the future held. Tomorrow, she would wake up and face the world as Mary, not just on the inside, but on the outside too. It wouldn't be easy, but she knew now that she had the strength to do it. In the quiet of her room, Mary made a promise to herself. She would live every day with the same courage and authenticity she had shown today. She would be true to herself, no matter what obstacles she faced, and she would never again hide who she really was. As sleep finally claimed her, Mary's last thoughts were of the dance, of Barry's warm smile, of Amy's friendly hug, of the feeling of finally belonging. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, eager to embrace whatever the new day would bring. The next morning, Mary woke up feeling refreshed and energized. The events of the previous day felt almost like a dream, but the lingering happiness in her heart told her it had all been real. She had taken the first step towards living as her true self, and the world hadn't come crashing down. In fact, it had opened up in ways she never could have imagined. As she got ready for school, Mary made a decision. She would tell her parents tonight. The thought sent a jolt of fear through her, but she pushed it aside. She had faced her fears yesterday and come out stronger. She could do this too. At school, Mary felt like she was walking on air. Even though she was dressed as Marty, she carried herself with a new confidence. She caught Sarah's eye in the hallway, and her friend gave her a knowing wink and a thumbs up. As she made her way to her locker, she heard a familiar voice call out, "Hey, Mar!" There was a pause and then softer, "Mary?" She turned to see Barry standing there, a mix of surprise and warmth in his eyes. For a moment, Mary's heart stopped. Would he be upset? Would he feel deceived? But then Barry's face broke into a wide smile. "I thought it was you," he said softly. "You have the same beautiful eyes." Mary felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Barry, I can explain." Barry shook his head. "You don't have to explain anything. I meant what I said last night. There's something special about you, Mary, and I'd still really like to get that coffee with you if you're interested." Tears of relief and joy welled up in Mary's eyes. "I'd love that," she whispered. As they walked to class together, Mary felt a sense of hope blooming in her chest. She had taken the first steps towards living as her true self, and the world had embraced her with open arms. There would be challenges ahead, she knew, but for the first time in her life, Mary felt ready to face them. She wasn't just Mary Kane on the inside anymore. She was Mary Kane to the world, ready to live authentically and embrace whatever the future might hold. And as she walked down the hallway, hand in hand with Barry, surrounded by the buzz of school life, Mary couldn't wait to see what came next.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.